Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Introduce myself. My name is Reski Meila Putri. I majored in Economic Education in Padang State University. Okay, now I want presentation about the assignment of macroeconomic theory about the measuring, calculation, and analysis of GDP, CPI, GDP deflator, and unemployment rate. Okay, before enter the next material, we must know what is definition of gross domestic product or GDP deflator. GDP deflator is a price index that measures the gross domestic product by adjusting the impact of change in price of goods and service to the true value of goods and service produced locally in the economy. So what purpose of GDP deflator? The GDP price deflator measures the change in price for all of the goods and service produced in economy. The next purpose is using the GDP price deflator help economy compare the level of real economic activity from one year to another. The next word, formula calculating the GDP deflator. Formula is GDP deflator equal nominal GDP divide real GDP multiply 100. Nominal GDP constrains the effect of inflation and quantity, whereas real GDP is only quantity. Thus, as long as there is upward pressure on price, nominal GDP will be higher than real GDP. The two numbers will be the same in the base year. Furthermore, if we divide nominal GDP by real GDP, we will in fact get the aggregate price level. So, in this case, the change in the GDP deflator number from period to period reflects the rate of inflation. The next is inflation. Inflation to calculate formula is inflation rate equals GDP deflator multiply 100 GDP minus 1 deflator. The next example, for example, in year 2009, nominal GDP is 3,500 and real GDP is 2,345. And 2010 year, nominal GDP is 3,451 and real GDP is 2,131. So the flatter implicit price GDP deflator prefers initially the formula is nominal GDP divide real GDP multiply 100. So we have 2009 equal 149.3 and 2010 year is 161.9. So for looking the inflation rate, the formula before we have x.5 percentage. The next about consumer price index CPI. So what is CPI? CPI is measuring tools for assessing the average change in the price for goods and services that are considered very important. CPI is calculated by monitoring price change for each item. Typically, the CPI will be issued 1 month after the assessment is carried out. So, the data publishing this month is the result of the CPI assessment in the previous month. Furthermore, the data will be collected to measure the annual rate of inflation. So, what is useful of CPI? CPI also useful for determining the level of cost at the fixed unit price. The CPI is a reference to an average level of good and service, which is referred to as a representative group of average consumer per case. So, what is important of the Consumer Price Index or CPI? The first is Consumer Price Index. Data is considered important because it can show how fast the price of goods and services increase. When the price goes up, it means that inflation is happening. Conversely, if prices are stable, it means that there is deflation. The next important is the rate of inflation will be used by the central bank as a benchmark in making a policy, whether it is increasing, lowering, or maintaining price interest rate, which serves to stimulate or restrain consumer spending, which is ultimately able to influence the inflation rate. The next word, unemployment rate. What is unemployment rate? Unemployment rate, the percentage of the workforce that is currently unemployment. Economics define the workforce as the share of the working age population where are currently employed plus those who are unemployed will care actively begging for work. The formula for looking unemployment rate is equal quantity of unemployment divide labor force. A group of kinds of unemployment. Kind employment have 4 kinds. There are structural unemployment, frictional unemployment, cyclical unemployment, and seasonal unemployment. Okay, the first, structural unemployment. Structural unemployment. This unemployment arises because they do not have skill, or they have skill but do not match to demand. The cause is due to change in the structure of the economy. For example, due to change in technology. The next, frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment, oftentimes individuals take their time before finding the right job. When actively looking for work, they are categorized as unemployed. The third unemployment is cyclical unemployment. During the business cycle, it is not only real GDP that fluctuates, but also the unemployment rate, although the supply of labor remains unchanged. The demand for labor changes during parts of the business cycle, thus there are a period when demand is high or cycle unemployment is low, and there are periods when demand is low or cyclical unemployment is high. The last unemployment is seasonal unemployment. This is like cycle unemployment, but the problem stems from seasonal factor and is not caused by the up and down of economic activity. For example, during budget period, the demand for certain jobs during holiday is often higher than the normal season. This or just thank you. Just it my presentation. Sorry for my mistake and see you next time.